Alright, welcome back to the channel. Our app already shows all the matches, but some users might want to see only live games or finished matches or otherwise. Today, we'll be adding filters using both JavaScript for instant UI updates and Flask for server-side efficiency. That way, if you want to filter the matches without reloading the page, or if you want to capture fresh live data automatically, you should be able to do this on the fly. So, we will implement these in two approaches for each of those features. You can then pick which one works best for your project. Now, to demonstrate this very quickly, let's change our matches. Currently, we're looking at Champions League matches, so let's go into our API reference documentation and get the league code for the Brazilian matches because those are still ongoing. That way we can actually see our filter in action. Now we can pick up that code and modify the URL in our app.py file. Instead of CL for Champions League, we are going to use BSA for the Brazilian league. You can also update the header so that it's reflected appropriately. Now once we go ahead and run this Flask application, we should be able to see the changes. You can see the regular season matches. There are currently no live matches, and we can also see upcoming games or matches which could either be scheduled or timed or cancelled or postponed and so on, depending on the code that we write in our JavaScript. So, how do we go about this? First, we add filter buttons above the table. Okay, we're going to use Bootstrap button group to do that. So the button group adds those buttons visually, and it's imperative that we use the data status attribute, which is an HTML data attribute, to identify each of these filters or buttons. We also must match the API status values exactly. For instance, live, finished, scheduled, and so on. We also need to add the data status on the table rows so that it gets to store each status for the matches, and JavaScript, which we're going to jump into shortly, is going to compare the values we provide against values in the button clicks. Once we have those set up, we can even go ahead and add an additional column to make sure we can see the different status of the matches. We now jump into the script, the JavaScript, which is going to filter our rows without reloading our entire page. Key points to note here: the dataset.status must match those values in our HTML, like we just discussed, and display none actually hides non-matching rows. Now the filter buttons select all the buttons inside that particular HTML element, and we get to compare the button's data status with the row's data status. We get to display it or we hide it based on the result. So the empty string resets to default. Now we also want to think about when we load the page initially, we want to make sure that all the matches are displayed. So we add that in our JavaScript code. And that's it for our client-side filtering using Vanilla JavaScript for lightning fast work, for lightning fast updates or filters. But this only works with preloaded data. Now onto the server side filtering, which is the backend where we have our Flask app.py. This comes in very handy when we have larger data sets or we have multiple back and forth interactions, when we have really production grade code that needs to be refreshed very often. So we start by adding requests as well as JSONify libraries to the import that's coming from the Flask package. and set up a route. This is the route that we're going to go to, the URL, to be able to access this filter that is done for us on the back end. We define a function, let's call it API matches, and in this function we simply just request the arguments that are going to be passed to that URL. So we'll get that status from the URL, then we get to fetch the matches. We already have a function that is written for us in the previous video, get matches function. We'll just go ahead and use that. Then we proceed to filter the results if there is any need, and then return it as a JSON format. So to code this, we simply get our status as a variable, which is going to hold the argument that we're getting from the URL. Then after that is done, we go ahead and call the get matches function and save the result as matches. Also remember that if we need a default value, we can use all, so that all the matches are displayed each time for us. Now for us to do the filter, we go ahead and just do a computation, if else statement or conditional, and say, hey, if the status is all, go ahead and give me matches. Otherwise, based on the values that we have seen already in the documentation, we get to identify what we get. Now in order to do that, we use Python's list comprehension, which is pretty much going to say, hey, for matches that you're going to get back, go ahead and check the status and throw it in the matches variable. At the end of the day, we want JSONify to convert that Python list to a JSON format, and voila. Now if we go into the API/matches status equal to live or scheduled or finished, we should be able to see only the particular matches that meet that particular status requirement.
Like an eagle and we always play like we dance. Only today, there's no tomorrow. We fall behind in this place. There's no space for fear or sorrow. Is it true that you want it? Then act like you mean it. With everyone watching, it's truth or dare. Can you feel it?
Now on to part 2, which has to do with automatically refreshing the page. The easiest way, which is a little bit clunky, has to do with setting up HTML in the head section. So we go ahead and update the meta to just refresh and give it a value for the number of seconds we want it to refresh, and that's it.
Is it true that you want it? Then act like you mean it. The whole world is watching.
Secondly, we could also use JavaScript to fetch, which has a smoother way of doing it. There are many ways you can do it. You can just do a basic auto refresh for the entire page, or you can use some smarter partial refresh with no API endpoint needed. But in this case, we're going to use an API endpoint, which we'll look at in the other video or in the next video, So make sure you smash that like button and subscribe so that I'll show you how this is carried on. So there are other minimalistic one-liners that we can use, and we don't want to focus on that, but understand that we can always get these multiple ways of getting our input or our auto refresh done. Now we've gotten those two tools for filtering as well as the two ways of doing the refreshing automatically. Now that we start getting live data, we want to make sure the scores are updated every 30 seconds or every 1 minute as you need. And it's up to you if you want to pick the server side for heavy data or the client side for speed. It's up to you. So next time, make sure you check out the video. We're going to be caching our results so that we have even better performance, and we can also address the issue of rate limits when the API tells us we can only fetch 110 5 times per minute. Awesome. Now make sure you like again, share, subscribe. This is Vitus DK, and guess what? You already know.